Okay, everybody, I want to do another video today. And the fun thing about videos and learning about biology and life science is that pretty much every topic is life or death, right? Because every topic is about living or dying. And today is no different. What we're going to talk about today is a couple of functions of the cell that are really important to keep you alive and everything on Earth alive. And those topics are photosynthesis. This is something you've probably heard about since you were in third grade or maybe even younger. Everybody knows that photosynthesis is something plants do. And we'd also like to talk about, this sounds fancier, it's really easy though, cellular respiration. All right, and we're only going to go into a little bit of depth on these. There is a whole lot you can learn about both of these things, but we're going to stick with just the basics you need for life science, and I might put a couple of references up there for deeper learning if you want to go and explore on your own a little bit deeper about these. Now, here, the thing about these is that they are opposite functions, okay? And you'll understand that a little more when we get to the end of the video, okay? They're opposites. They result in exact opposite products. So let's talk about what these are. We're going to start with photosynthesis, and then we'll move on to cellular respiration. So photosynthesis. Photo means light, and to synthesize means to combine and make things, okay? So when we talk about photosynthesis, obviously we're combining light with other things. And that's basically what we are going to do. Photosynthesis takes place in an organelle that we should be familiar with called the chloroplast. And hopefully you still remember what the chloroplast is. On the drawings and stuff, it often looks something like this. It's kind of an oblong little shape, and sometimes it'll have these little flat stacks of sacs inside. Yeah, that's a pretty good little chloroplast. And let's look at it in a little more detail. Inside, not counting the little flat sacs here, but this little stuff right here, there's a watery solution, a watery liquid inside here. It's called stroma. And these little sacs right here are called thylakoids. It's a fun word to say and spell. Thylakoids. Impress your friends with that one. Okay? Thylakoids contain a material you've probably actually heard of before called chlorophyll. All right, chloro comes from the Greek meaning green. Phyll means leaf. And this is what makes leaves green, chlorophyll. Okay, makes sense. Maybe not the most original name, but hey, it makes sense, and that's what's important. All right, so what does this chlorophyll stuff do besides making things green? And I'll give you a little hint later on about why it makes things green, but, well, it all comes down to this whole little process. Chlorophyll can do this neat trick where it can absorb sunlight and use it. Now, let's draw us a happy little sun here. Let's look at this process. The sun, of course, radiates light, and light is a form of energy. You'll learn about this more in physical science. Okay, light is a form of energy. And that energy hits the earth all the time. And most of the animal kingdom, we can't do anything with it other than get a suntan. All right, the sunlight is kind of wasted on us. We can do a little bit with it, but for the most part, we waste a lot of that energy. However, plants have these nice little leaves full of chlorophyll, All right, and what that chlorophyll does is it absorbs that light and uses it as energy. Well, what's the use the energy for? Well, it has to absorb a couple other things too. Another thing that those plants absorb, all out here in the air around us, are air molecules, different kinds of air molecules. One that we're familiar with is CO2, which is better known as carbon dioxide. It's really bad for global warming. It's really good for plants though. Okay, we don't want too much of it, but plants need some. Okay, so they absorb light, they absorb carbon dioxide, and one other thing that anybody that gardens knows is you also need what? Water. Good old water. We always need H2O. So plants take in light, they take in the CO2, and they take in the H2O. The chlorophyll takes the light, uses energy, and it goes through all these complicated processes where it takes the carbon dioxide, it takes the water, it puts it all together. And on the other side of this, what the plant ends up making using this energy is, well, one of the first things it makes, it puts it together into a type of sugar. A type of sugar molecule. I'm just calling a little red square here to represent that it's a solid. It's not a gas or a liquid. It's a solid. It's usually in the form of like a carbohydrate. And this molecule is one we've talked about called glucose. And of course, glucose is a sugar. It's got that OSE on the end, which means it's a sugar. All right, and it has a byproduct. And what do I mean by byproduct? I mean a waste product, something that the plant does not need. The other thing it makes that it does not need, this is what the plant needs now. The plant wants the sugar. This is the plant's food. Okay, this is food. Okay, this is glucose. It's the food. It's the plant's going to need, and incidentally, when we eat the plant, it becomes our food too. But it also has a byproduct, it has a waste product. This process releases a gas. And that gas is O2, better known as oxygen, which is a very, very good thing for us these days, right? If you want to breathe, you need plants releasing oxygen. And since the plants don't need it, they release it. So we're really glad that this photosynthesis process takes place because it uses light, carbon dioxide, and water to make glucose, which is ultimately the foundation of the food chain, and oxygen, which we all need to breathe. So if we break that down, and we can write it as a chemical formula. Now, you don't have to, those of you in my class don't necessarily have to remember all the numbers yet, but knowing this formula would be a good thing. Knowing the parts of it, though, by name is what's most important. The formula is, well, let's start off with the light, which is energy, right? And the plant adds to it CO2. It actually adds 6 molecules of CO2. This is carbon dioxide. We're going to come back to this formula again. We're going to do it in reverse. And it also adds 6 molecules of H2O, which is water. And so for those of you who are in my class, you need to know light, energy, carbon dioxide, and water. You don't necessarily have to remember how many molecules it is. Okay, that's what photosynthesis takes in. This arrow points to what it gives out. You're going to learn about this a little more in physical science next year too. Okay, this is yields. On the other end, you get C6, H12, O6. Some of you might remember this when we studied organic molecules. This is glucose, which is a sugar, right? And what do we say the byproduct was? Oxygen. And it'll release 6 of those molecules. So just to recap photosynthesis, what the main things you need to know about photosynthesis: it takes place in the chloroplasts. It uses chlorophyll, okay? it takes in light, carbon dioxide, and water. And on the other side, it puts out glucose and oxygen. All right? Everybody clear on that? We'll move on to cellular respiration. All right, cellular respiration, it sounds like a big fancy word, but we'll see that it's no more difficult than the photosynthesis we just talked about. They're similar, but they're in fact opposites. Now, of course, photosynthesis only takes place in plants because only plant cells have chloroplasts. Well, I won't want to say only plants. There's some, algae and things. But yeah, for the most part, think plants when you think photosynthesis. You got to have some chlorophyll or chloroplast to do photosynthesis. However, cellular respiration, it takes place in the mitochondria. And we've talked about the mitochondria, and both plants and animals have a mitochondria, okay? Any cell that has a mitochondria has cellular respiration. Mitochondria is really cool, really cool little organelle. It used to be its own little organism, they think. And then it kind of got co-opted by the body. It kind of looks something like this on most of the drawings. And it's got its own DNA that comes from your mother, if you remember that. Okay. And it's got this cool little membrane in here. These little loops right here are called the cristae. And inside the loops, coolest name in the cell, what is the matrix? That's right, they call it the matrix, this little space inside here. You don't necessarily have to know that, but I just thought it'd be interesting. Okay, so the mitochondria is where cellular respiration takes place. Photosynthesis is in the chloroplast, cellular respiration's in the mitochondria. Now, what does the mitochondria do? What is the cellular respiration? Basically, you're turning food into energy. That's the whole point of cellular respiration. You're turning food into energy. And so when I say food, what do I mean by food? Well, it's in your face. If you can remember food being in your face for cellular respiration. All right. Show you what I mean here. Let's draw us a happy little guy. Why is this guy happy? Because this guy has got lunch. All right, if you remember earlier, I used the same color scheme. Let's give him a little cookie here. He's taking a bite out of it already. It doesn't matter what the food is, okay? The food that he's eating, yum, yum, yum. This food right here, this food, any kind of food we eat, it's going to have some form of glucose in it. It might be in the form of a carbohydrate or something else, but it's going to be glucose. And the glucose is going to his digestive system, okay, where it will be broken down. And now we're about to talk about, I mean, you guys, we study the digestive system. You know how it breaks down food. Well, we're going to talk about why it breaks down food right here. Let's draw us another face, though, because that's not the only thing we need. It says, in your face. Now, this guy, he's doing something hopefully all of you do on a regular basis. No, I don't mean pick your nose. What are these little blue dots? These are oxygen. Yes, oxygen. This guy's breathing. Hopefully, you guys breathe a lot too, right? And all these little dots are going down into the respiratory system, into the lungs. We talked about the respiratory system, right? Now we're going to explain why that happens too. Those two things will come together finally. Okay, so if somebody ever asks the question, why do you eat? Why do you have to eat? Why do you have to breathe? The answer, to live, kind of misses the point of the question. It's like, why do we need to eat and breathe to live? Well, this will give you a much better explanation. It won't be the whole explanation, but it'll be a pretty good explanation. Okay? So when you're doing cellular respiration, you're going to take in glucose, usually by food, eating food, right? And you're going to take in oxygen by breathing. And when you combine these two, what's going to happen in your mitochondria? Actually, part of it's going to happen in your cytoplasm of your cell, but then the majority of it's going to take place, hopefully, in your mitochondria. What's going to happen is you're going to end up with a couple of things. The most important of which is something that we've mentioned before. I'm going to draw a little lightning bolt. Yep. Fun little molecule. It's called ATP. Yep. There you go. All right. ATP. This is energy. This is all the energy in the cell. This is what your body uses for energy. It's ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Nice little fun molecule. Very, very useful. You actually get about anywhere from 30 to 38 molecules of ATP. It used to be 36 to 38 would be what most textbooks say, but more recent stuff says we might not get but 30 or so molecules. But still, that's not bad. For one molecule of glucose, you get 30 molecules of ATP. It's a pretty good trade-off. Okay? Now, there are some byproducts, too. There's some stuff we don't necessarily use. Okay? When we combine glucose and oxygen, we also end up with a gas. You know what gas this is? Hopefully, somebody's thought about it. You end up with carbon dioxide, which our lungs are very good at getting rid of. That's why we have to breathe out. We breathe in for the oxygen. We use the oxygen to make ATP. We end up with carbon dioxide that we have to send back out. And you actually make, when you do this process, you also end up making a little bit of, oh wait, wrong drawing. There we go. You end up making a little bit of water, a little bit of H2O in your own body. You're your own little water factory there. Didn't even know it. Okay? So you combine glucose and oxygen in your body, and in your mitochondria, you make ATP, water, and carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide you get rid of with your lungs. The ATP is what you use for energy. So what's the formula for this look like? Well, it looks like glucose. If you remember, glucose is C6H12O6 plus good old oxygen. You're going to take in 6 molecules of oxygen. And on the other side of this reaction in your cell, this is all in your cells, you're going to end up, that's a 2 by the way, you're going to end up with ATP plus 6 CO2s plus 6 H2Os. Okay? This is cellular respiration. You end up with energy, carbon dioxide, and water. You take in glucose and oxygen. Now, I'm reiterating this because I want you to look for a second at the one we did before for photosynthesis. Okay, photosynthesis, you had energy in the form of light, right? Plus, you had carbon dioxide. Plus, you had water. H2O. And on the other end, you produced glucose and you produced oxygen. Okay, so I put this up here because this is photosynthesis down here. I want you to just be able to compare these two equations. Okay, energy, carbon dioxide, and water on the combination side over here. Energy, carbon dioxide, and water on the product side over here. This produces glucose and oxygen. This uses glucose and oxygen. They're the exact same equation, just flipped around. Okay? And you need to be aware of that. And this goes back to when we talked about ecosystems. We talked about the sun being the source of energy for almost all ecosystems. Well, if you look at photosynthesis here, this is your energy. It comes from the sun, right? Your energy comes from the sun. All right? It gets converted into glucose and oxygen. And then when animals eat the plants, the glucose and oxygen are broken back down into a different kind of energy, ATP, that their body uses. But where does this energy ultimately come from? Well, it came from the sunlight that was used in photosynthesis by the plant. So all these are tied together. And you need to be aware of both of these. One last little point I want to make before I wrap this video up is there is a possibility. All this cellular respiration we were just talking about is aerobic, which means there was oxygen in my formula. Remember, cellular respiration, I had 6 O2s right here, right? That made it aerobic. Aerobic just means with oxygen. It is possible to create ATP anaerobically, means without oxygen. Okay, anaerobic. When you do it anaerobic, it's called fermentation. Okay, and organisms can do, different organisms do it different ways. We, like some bacteria and stuff, we tend to use lactic acid fermentation. Okay, fermentation, remember, it's anaerobically producing energy. So no oxygen. Just going to put no O2, okay? This is with O2. Both of these are talking about making energy, or ATP. You can do it aerobic, that's normal. You can think of aerobically as normal. Okay, the normal way to do it is aerobically, but in emergency situations, without any oxygen, it can do it. It can do it either through lactic acid or alcohol fermentation. All right, this we use this to make cheese and all kinds of stuff, and of course, alcohol is alcohol. Yeast and stuff make alcohol. This is how they make alcoholic beverages. Is fermentation. They cause fermentation to occur, so no oxygen. Put it in a low oxygen environment, make it start fermenting. Your body creates lactic acid when you exercise really hard. That's the way your muscles get all the energy they need, even though there's not enough oxygen. And so just remember there are 2 types of anaerobic ways to make energy that you need to know for this class, which is lactic acid fermentation and alcohol fermentation. All right, and that'll about wrap it up for cellular respiration and photosynthesis. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and look out for the next video.